Business as Unusual is a thought-provoking podcast that explores the innovative strategies, disruptive ideas, and unconventional practices driving successful leaders and companies in the ever-evolving world of modern business. Subscribe, comment, and share for weekly inspiration with our host, Aisala.
Take that down. Hello. Welcome to Systemic Solutions, which is a fancy way of saying that Jeremy is involved in making the world a better place in a variety of ways. And we're going to talk about a couple of them today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm actually not wearing a hat today, so it's
I mean, technically you're always wearing a lot of hats, but
True.
So I met Jeremy actually through the Harmony Voices Foundation, is Alicia Fall, who is always bringing amazing people together. But maybe, I mean, we talked a little bit, but maybe can you give some form of summary about what you're up to, or maybe what led you into that?
Sure. Yeah. It's been a long journey. I've always been a researcher, even from when I was really little. And my mom always jokes that, I was the kid that wanted to dissect the bugs, but God forbid if my brother squished the bugs. And it was one of those things that, even from very little, there was an understanding and appreciation for nature. And that's a lot to do with my grandparents. And, it's really been quite a wild ride in the fact of beyond everything that's going on. I actually started doing copywriting in my late 30s and started traveling and realized that the impacts that I was starting to see beyond my home, like on the TV, were actually real, and actually feeling those effects and seeing the communities and how they were immediately impacted. And so shifted into sustainable copywriting. And then from there, I was teaching abroad. And while I was teaching English in Korea and Hong Kong, in very high polluted areas. And I was like, man, I have to figure something out. Mm-hmm. And got involved with Green Revolution. And the Green Revolution Foundation is it's getting its legs underneath it. And they're trying to do the world's first non-for-profit coffee shop, where all the proceeds will go towards activists and research for things like myself that we're working on helping.
That's right. greenrevolution.earth.
That's it. Yeah. And so I started investigating hemp. I started looking into agriculture just to understand the things that I was seeing of the variations in food were all based on what you could get. So like being from the Midwest, I love meat and cheese. Being in Asia, they don't have a whole lot of cheese. So learned to get away from those habits. But it was very interesting dynamic of seeing, as you're into these communities, how they've adapted and adjusted. And there's a lot of pieces that play a role in food. I've always loved to cook. So it was something that it was very, it was a passive process for me. It was something that was natural interest of just wanting to understand more. And it's taken me along a long journey of understanding hemp and sustainable systems and learning about regenerative agriculture, and then tying that in of the reality of the indigenous wisdoms that I'd learned from growing up with my grandparents. It's really kind of one of those things that's come full circle now at this point. So it's been a crazy ride, but happy to be at this point.
Now, and I appreciate the things that you've brought into my awareness, and the way that, I mean, you do seem tireless. Like, I guess probably I'm not always around, but for those of you that are tuning in, like, it's not uncommon to be talking to Jeremy and he'll be like, I'm doing this thing and this thing, and I'm gonna go fight a fire, and then I'm come back and write a grant. And you're like, wow, I may be doing none of those things and I'm already exhausted, but I'm glad you're out there. And so I guess, how do you do that? Like, you definitely do seem to go at full steam. Do you have ways that you rejuvenate, or do you just fall over like a toddler?
Well, coffee goes a long way. I've worked on eating healthier and having better habits. But the reality is, and to be honest, in all truth, it's just passion. It's something that, from my experiences, as traumatic as some of them were, for being, grew up in a middle-class family, nothing really abnormal in my childhood, but was really when I started traveling and experiencing, water deprivation, and people that just seeing whole communities living in shanties in South Africa, or seeing people starving from hunger and people digging through garbage cans just to eat. Like, those types of experiences have become extremely traumatic in a good way for me, because it's something that's a constant reminder of the reality of what people are going through. So those experiences, and I still to this day continue to try and remind myself and re-immerse myself in those experiences of, there are people that are suffering through a lot. So that primarily is where I get my energy, of having those visuals and just remembering those moments of, if I'm not doing it, I'm not helping these other people. So that's a big motivator.
Mikey also wants the hat gang, which, I feel like we really ought to have a pause at some point and bring everybody into the joy of the hat game. But, but until then, I have my squid hat. Like we could take this up a notch. But to go back to what you're saying, 'cause it's actually really serious and important. And I think it's something that, I heard this once, that, capitalism is people starving next to a pile of food. And I feel like that we, especially for folks who are brought up in America and maybe haven't had the chance for whatever reason to really experience another culture, there's a lack of understanding of how high a level of consumption that we engage in without comprehension of the conservation efforts, or even small amounts of thoughtfulness that could be reduction in our impact, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's to be honest, that's one of the biggest obstacles for me being back in the US. It's a difficult process, because it's something where seeing those things, it's hard to come back and just forget. And it's hard to go back to normal and life as usual. Like, I've worked in restaurants where people are just complaining about, steaks. And I'm like, listen, it's, you wanted it this, it's like medium plus instead of medium. It's like, okay, is that really enough to throw a temper tantrum and all of these things? And it was hard, because for me, coming from these other things, you get a whole different perspective of what it's like to be hungry. And it's the issues that we face is, and that's how I got into the waste management aspect of agriculture and just human consumption in general, is we look at these things like they're an infinite resource. And the problem is, as they're finding out in the Southwest, and to be fair, a lot of them already knew it, water is a very finite resource. Food is like topsoil. They're all finite. There's only so much. We can always make more topsoil, but the process of eroding it is so much faster. It's similar to, it's easy to gain weight for a lot. Of us. I
am so good at that. I am really
right. I'm so good at it. I wish I could stop.
Right.
Those are the pieces where it's like, okay, it's easy to take. It's hard to give. And that's really where we're at especially in terms of a society in the US. And that's completely general, but we don't really care where our stuff goes. Once it's out of our hand and in the bin, that's it. I did my job. I put it in the recycling. But the truth is that a lot of those don't actually go where they're supposed to. A lot of them, as people are finding, go to the ocean. They go to where we don't want them to be. and they make our lives more difficult. And that's because of this. It's out of sight, out of mind. And you can't have it both ways, where it's, I have an infinite amount of stuff and I have a finite place for it to go. Once it's here, it's gone. I never have to think about the plastic bottle again.
It's kind of how we built Manhattan, right? Like, I mean, maybe we just want to make another island. No, I'm kidding. We don't want to do that.
They're making them in Korea. So it's, I'm very interested to see how, I call it the Waterworld project in Korea, where they're making homes and these complexes.
I loved that movie, but it was horrible. Let's be clear.
It's theory and application are very different, especially in the world of science. So I'm interested and I'm following it very closely, but it's still one of those where I'm like, there's other solutions. It's like going to Mars.
Yeah.
Mars, if we can't do it here, we probably can't do it on Mars. So let's run a couple of things. Let's try some stuff and see what we can do and make our lives better. But
well, and one of the things that you're talking about too, I think is important to note, which is that like the way that we manage our trash and our infrastructure around things like, say, recycling and waste is we haven't created a system in which corporations, like, you can't go to the store and buy something not in plastic. Like, you could try, and it's really unreasonable. Like, yes, there was that woman on, like, like, I lived a whole year with my own toothpaste. And you know what? That's great. But it's really not something that the majority of people are going to have the time and space for. And especially like at a scalable level that would make a difference. What we need is a systemic change, right? And part of that is for corporations to take responsibility for the waste they create. Like, they create all of this plastic packaging that we kind of don't have an option to purchase. And then we're shamed for not recycling properly when that's not even going to be turned into new packaging. Like, it's a very, very effective manipulation to take the focus away from the people who create the problem, because they don't want to spend their profits on fixing it, in my opinion, personally. End rant.
Yes, no, exactly. I've spoken to numerous people about it. In the Global Hemp Association, there's a gentleman, Joe Hickey, and he's brilliant. He's been in the hemp industry for a long time, and I've talked to him a couple weeks ago about that, because he's doing a lot for the legalities of hemp in the cannabis industry. And I'm like, where is greenwashing at the end of it? Like, where is that accountability?
Will you define what greenwashing is, just for folks too?
See, that's the amazing part. So it's extremely, I'm smiling out of just raw frustration, to be honest.
Okay.
It's only laughable.
Okay.
So greenwashing there's a bunch of different ways of doing it. It's a marketing strategy that businesses and people, nonprofits, we do it on a daily basis of things that we say and do that it's a matter of, for me, accountability. If I say I'm sustainable, Jeremy, how are you sustainable? What are you doing? Oh, well, I'm no longer, consuming plastics. Well, that's great. How are you not consuming plastics? Oh, well, I'm just, reusing the same like plastic bottle, or, I'm not drinking plastic bottles of water anymore. It's like, well, what kind of detergent do you use? Oh, I use liquid detergent. Does that come in a plastic bottle? Yeah, but I'm not consuming plastic. It has to, and it's like, okay, no, stop. The effort is there. The intent, and a lot of these people that do this, the intent is genuine. They really do want to do better, and they want to. But that's where this system thought process comes in, of understanding the dynamics of what you're doing. It's, well, I'm no longer buying plastics from this. But you're right. The inevitability of avoiding plastics entirely is just like going cold turkey on fossil fuels. It's not realistic. Should we cut back? Should they be reduced? 100%. But then greenwashing comes in of these bioplastics. And almost every bioplastic that I've looked at has been something where there's still petroleum based in it. But there's multiple groups that have said, I have this bioplastic pen. When you're done with it, you can stick it in your compost and it'll be gone. It's like, no, that's not how that works. It can be composted. It has to be industrially composted. which means it has to go to a specific facility. It can be done. It's just that there's a gap in the communication that's inconvenient for either the listener or for the marketer. And so that's where you get in that fine line of greenwashing of, is there a quantifiable intent, and is it clearly communicated to create realistic expectations for the consumer? And that's really where the greenwashing gets frustrating for me, because there's a tug and pull of, well, our consumer's not smart enough to understand what this is, so we won't tell them. It's like, okay, but there's also like all of these things of even your toothpaste, like your toothbrush is plastic. So really, where is that line drawn of, do we want to go back to, getting hair and taking hair to brush our teeth, or what's the other solution? And the problem is, for a lot of these, there's not, but there's people with really good intentions that are working on them. So I'm like, I get it, and I want to support what you're doing, but please stop saying this. Like, you have to take this out of your language, because you're setting a false expectation where we're finding now so like going into the electric cars on a tangent, that tires are actually emitting more fumes and gases and toxic chemicals than the cars. The torque and the way the engines work, you're actually releasing more chemicals into the air from the tires than you would by a normal gas, like from the exhaust pipe. So it's, and that study is, even in my perspective, biased, but it is something where we're not really thinking through that. And we're looking at all the batteries of, well, that's great that you got a battery, but it was mined. Are you accounting for that carbon footprint of you mining that, of you manufacturing it, of you delivering it to be put in the car? Those are not parts that are included in their carbon removal process. It's, you have no fossil fuel emissions from your car, which is true. But the fossil fuel emissions that went into making the battery is massive. Also, the fossil fuel impact, the carbon impact that goes into where does the battery go when it's done is massive. And where I'm from in Ohio, our electric grid is fed by nearly 70% fossil fuels. So the electricity you're putting into your electric car is still fossil fuel based. So it's like, there's a gap in the communication where people have the best intentions. I want to buy an electric car because I want to do what's best for the world. But there's not enough accessible information for the consumer to make that choice and say, okay, let's start pushing for a better innovation and a better method. And that's where things like the bio batteries and things like that are coming in. It's just, they're not quite to lithium yet. So I'm really excited for those, but we still have a little bit of work to do.
We still have time. Yeah. Well, and it's sort of, I think about like plastic. So, it's become demonized because it's ubiquitous, but at the same time, individual packaging and plastic lined cans created a lot of food safety, and that, figuring out how we would transition to safe practices that, because and that's, I think what you said earlier, it's not just with science, like ideas and ideals are beautiful, right? We all have the theory, right? And then there's dealing with the practicalities. And there are certain things that I think as modern people, we don't always think about. Like pre-COVID, most people would have been like, we got this stuff solved, right? And now it's like, oh, wait a minute. Now we are still susceptible to weather and viruses and food safety issues and preservation. Like we still have all the same needs. We've come up with a lot of innovations that allow us to do it at scale and much more safely, but they are having this other impact on our climate and the world that is obviously not acceptable. And at the same time, trying to come up with a solution that also deals with that safety needs and those kinds of things it's complicated, which is why it's going to, I think, probably be piecemeal, and we're going to have some stops and starts. And I think that's one of the things that we, maybe we're so used to, like things just working because we lived in this very short period of time where a lot of technology just made things real convenient. And I think that one of the personally, one of the attitudes I think we need to adopt is a little bit more of that innovative sort of like, all right, we'll see what happens. I don't know.
Well, and it goes into my, like, the systems thought process is actually something that I'll just admit I stole it. It's something, it's a concept that I stole from, and it's an indigenous concept. It's something where, is what I'm doing benefiting today? 7 generations down, is it going to benefit them? And it's that process of thinking of, looking from, instead of cradle to grave, we're looking at a cradle to cradle, where we're creating a loop of, we're getting out of the single use. There wasn't a single use in the indigenous communities. It was, you use everything. Everything has a purpose and everything has a place. And it's something where if you killed a bison, you used everything. Everything was used. And we somehow got out of that into this egotistical mentality of infinite resources, infinite wealth. And I joke with my parents about the 80s and the big consumerism and nationals and all of these huge conglomerates, creating this mental space of, I can do whatever I want because I can just buy more of it, or I can do, like, I can get this, or like, there's a concept of possessions that happens where, as we're getting into these younger generations, we're finding that the possessions aren't as valuable anymore. It's more about, I want to spend time with my family. I want to travel. I want to, and it's more about, I'll take less money. I would love to get paid the same or more money, but the mental space is, I would rather get less money to be able to be happy today and to live in the now. And that's really where there was a massive shift of transition, where I think, being on the borderline of a Gen X and millennial, we're viewed as, other sides of the die, if you will. But really, it's still the same thing. It's just a matter of, we took a different perspective on the world. We saw what happened from working in cubicles. And it's like, I love my parents to death, but at the same time, it's something that, it was a reality for me at a very young age of, I want to do something that makes me happy. Like, I don't want to have to complain about waking up to work and dealing with people I don't like. And that's where I think a lot of these entrepreneurs are coming, where there's so much potential for change that it has a lot of potential to be catastrophic, because there's so much excitement and so much urgency now to change, because of climate, because of the water shortage, because of the fertilizer shortage, because of what's happening in Ukraine, all of these things. India, I read an article that 5 million people have already been displaced in India this year, just because of climate issues, flooding and droughts. And they're expecting within the next 3 to 5 years, 300 million people in India will be suffering from hunger. So it's like, these waves are coming, and there's such a need for the younger people, because they know and they see it. But what's happening is they're creating solutions that only impact the today. They don't really look to 2050 and 2100, because in their minds, for a good portion of them, it's, I need to do it today. I need to maximize my impact now. I need to get carbon out of the atmosphere. I need to do this. And it's like, but there's not enough of that systems and generational thought of, what is my impact? So my concern for it is, we're just going into the 80s again, just from a different side, where it's like, I'm rushing into, it's like these, I can have this now, so I'm going to get it now. And it's like, but how does that impact your kids? How does that impact your grandkids? Like, these decisions, we're not looking far enough down the chain to say, how does it impact these farmers? How does it impact, this city or these communities? And we're so caught up on the blinding perspective of, this is it, I need to do it now and I need to do it fast, that we're not exactly looking at the big picture of, well, how does this impact the ocean? How does this impact, all of the, yes, we'll save the glaciers, but what does that do for these communities here? And it's like, that's where the indigenous side really comes into play for a lot of the things that I discussed, because it's beyond, the self. There's so many other pieces at play, especially when talking about the environment, that it's naive to think that you can change it by one solution. No real silver bullets, unfortunately. At least I haven't found one.
Well, I mean, if anyone had, I would assume you'd at least be on the trail. You're definitely more steeped in information than I would say the typical person, and I appreciate that. I learned a lot working with you. You just made me think of, like, I think also in addition to the whatever else it is, one of the things that I've noticed is our news cycle is very short, right? Like, they raised inflation, or they raised interest rates like last week, and now everybody's like, oh my gosh, how are we going to deal with all this inflation? And I'm not saying it's been building up, but it's like something gets noticed, and then suddenly it's everything for like 2 weeks, right?
Right.
And then we've solved that, whatever it was. It's very like sitcom-y almost. Or if we haven't solved it, we stop talking about it. We move on to the next thing. And I feel like there's so much happening, and we're in this instant information age. And so the being able to step back, and by the time I've actually thought through something, the news cycle is 2 or 3 steps past me, because I need a little time to kind of digest the information and the impact and who's affected and who's, and make sure I'm checking sources that I feel are reasonably credible, and all of that kind of stuff. So by the time I've gone through all of that on a topic, nobody's interested in it. And the news is definitely not talking about it anymore. Right. And so I feel like that part is challenging. Like, how do you find folks, like, if you're wanting to engage in something that's maybe a larger systemic solution, how do I find those people when it's so easy for things to just get buried very quickly?
Well, and I don't want to get into conspiracies, but I feel like that's part of the agenda. Is it's the attention span. It's once the ratings start to drop from the attention, then like, okay, there's other stuff to talk. Like, the world's on fire. There's plenty of things. There's plenty of fires all over that we can talk about. So it's really just jumping from one to the other. And I think for me, my biggest recommendation, as someone that's even to this day wearing numerous hats, working in, remediation and, combating desertification, and then supporting indigenous communities and phytomining and all these other things, it's like, it's okay to be involved in a couple different things, but the key will be doing the things that you enjoy. Do it because it has some kind of connection to you, and it resonates, because just like everything, if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to want to continue it. And that's really the secret sauce of me holding a lot of this information in, my head that's filled primarily with rocks. It's one of those things that if it's important, you'll remember it. And if it's important, you'll want to learn about it. And that's really where, just from me being a teacher, that was a huge motivator for my students when I taught, of find your passion, pursue it. It's something where if it's something that you enjoy, you'll read it, you'll learn about it, you'll want to do more outside of the classroom. And that's when I knew that I did a good job, was if I could find that connection of something tangible in the real world to what I was teaching in the class. That's really where you generate that change, and you generate that inspiration. And I don't need to motivate you there. It's one of those that it will find you. If you dig deep enough. I connected with a gentleman from the UN last night, just because I was watching YouTube videos about a topic that he specialized in. And like 3 videos later, he was mentioned in all 3. And I was like, well, I guess I need to reach out and talk to this guy. And responded. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. Like, so excited about something simple, but it was just a topic that I was like, okay, well, I need to look into this. I'll read some research papers. I'll try and find them on YouTube and just see what they're involved in and what they're talking about. And it's that curiosity takes you down the rabbit hole, where it's like you find that person, and then that person is happy to help, because they understand that the issue is bigger than themselves.
Wait, sorry, so, I wanted to make you big. There we go.
Oh, no.
You're talking. This is how we should be doing this.
So that's really where I recommend for people to go. And the avenue I generally recommend them to take is find something, and then find, like in the entrepreneurial age, it's like you need a mentor. Well, have a couple mentors. Have people that are really specialized that you can build a relationship with, and trust and say, hey, if I have any questions, can I ask you? If you find any research papers that you think of me, send them to me. I'd love to read them. Like I want to and express that as a grateful learning opportunity of you're just happy to be there and happy to help. And at that point, that's when the hand comes down to pull you into whatever you're doing. So it's a longer process, but it's one where I've had a lot of, I'll say, success. I've found a lot of really influential and very intellectual people that I'm like, I could not do this without them. So
no, I think, that's great advice. That's really great advice. And I think and it speaks to my own experiences in life where if you really dedicate yourself to your passion, that there are a lot of opportunities that can arise in surprising ways. And so giving yourself the opportunity to discover those and not follow a script. Because I do feel like that's a lot of it. Like if you're going to be part of addressing some of the negative impact of our system, the script that we are handed or absorb, like the water we drink, is probably not the script that's going to help dismantle that. And so you're going to have to kind of step out a little bit into something uncomfortable and weird and try a different way.
Right. And I think from a business standpoint, it's something where I wasn't always doing this. I was, copywriting and teaching and learning about this. And it was only because I was passionate about it that I was able to do that. But because I was passionate about it, I was able to say, okay, instead of an hour of Netflix at the end of the day to relax, I'm going to watch, this documentary series, or I'm going to watch, I don't know if you've heard of, but there's a website called Water Bear, and they've got a bunch of documentaries for free. And so I got started just watching those. Actually, on my LinkedIn, I've got Greenwashing for Hamsters was from them. And they get little hamsters to act out what greenwashing is. And it's something where it's a really important resource for me, even to this day, of watching things like that. And it's similar to like a Seaspiracy or, all of these big Netflix documentaries, which they're haunting for me, to be honest, because some of them I've physically experienced those, and those are great, and those are for mass culture, but there's plenty of other sites beyond that one of where you can go and you can just experience different things, and it's still a visual piece, but to this point, I'll watch Netflix a couple times, but really it's more the documentary stuff. It's where can I get information? How can I learn about something? It gives my eyes a little bit of a rest from reading research articles for hours at a time, because it's, as much as, I enjoy
that could be heavy language.
It's hard to be motivated to read, 3 in a day, but if you love it, you'll do it. So I'm a bit of it.
Here's our friend Jason Jacobs. Hey, keep the collective support going to help you be you. Excellent vision, Jeremy, and the universe looks forward to helping you with your success for the health of people, planet, spirit, and prosperity. Thank you for being here, Jason.
Jason's my guy. I love Jason. I actually met him through a group called Catalyst 2030, and that was one where it was an organic thing. Like with Green Revolution, they asked me to do a speaking opportunity. And I met Asha Murphy, who's in Australia, and she connected me with Jason, who connected me to the Scholar Practitioner group there with a group of really brilliant researchers in Oceania. And it's been an amazing experience. A lot of information in a global network, but and I saw Green Revolution, so that's Attila. Attila's, I couldn't believe guy. I was teaching in Budapest and actually met a blues singer from Hungary that was living in Amsterdam. And I was just like, this is just too small of a world. So it's been a pleasure kind of to work with him and do all the stuff that we're doing. And I'm really excited for these community impacts that we've got working.
Well, and you reminded, I used to have a bumper. I used to have one of those cards full of bumper stickers. And one of my favorites was, get involved. The world is run by those who show up. And to a certain extent, that's really true. And you met Attila and you met Jason, and I'm so grateful to have met both of them through you and through Her Many Voices Foundation, because it's really inspiring to see people are committed to making a difference and to doing the work. It's part of why I was talking to you about why I do this particular show is I really want to raise up these things that people are doing to solve our problems, to create new opportunities, for energy and food, to address climate impact and the ravages that it's having on people and countries. And there's so much that's being done that's to the betterment, but we just don't know much about it or how to get involved or participate or support or anything like that. So actually I have two questions for you. One, what's one of the most surprising things you learned on your journey into climate awareness? And then two, you said one of the things that you said about like your tagline kind of is that one simple act is enough to begin making the world a better place. And so it's the most surprising thing. And then what is a simple act that you can recommend? It's two-part.
Yeah, I don't really deal with surprises too much. It's more of there's moments of enlightenment, I would say, where I'm just like, I never thought of that. And actually, one of my colleagues, Erin Lindley, she calls it hypotheguessing, where I'll get an idea and kind of have a little bit of a tangent curve on it and be like, oh, that would be really cool if it actually worked like that. And then you get those moments where it's like, yeah, it doesn't work like that. But every now and then you'll get one where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that actually worked. And those are like the really exciting times. But for the most surprising, I would say is the interest from investors and the interest in governments to do things and then contradict them. I speak, and part of why I'm not boisterous about all the things that I work on is you get a lot of investors that are like, I want to help you. I want to do this. I want to, what do you need? It's like, I need money. Like money makes the world go round. Like, that, I know that. I hate it, but that's the reality. And it's like, if you give me money, I can maximize it because I can change this community's life. Like I know for a fact what needs to be done and I can do it. And they're like, okay, great. And that's it. And it's like, okay, what are we doing? It's like, oh, well, I can't do it. Or like a lot of the government stuff will be, we're going to stop drilling for oil in the US, or we're going to stop these oil lines going through. And there's a project in Minnesota, Stop Line 3, that is just that. It's these oil companies are boring through indigenous lands, and the indigenous communities agreed to it. There was an agreement that was taken. The problem is that these companies took it way too far. They're draining the water. They're actually, depleting. There's a mussels population in the river it's only in this river that this species exists. And they're on the brink of extinction because these companies are taking the water out. And it's like, there's all of these things where it's so quick to say, yes, I'll present the best piece. And then it's so fast to just go back on it. And it's like, that's really where, for me, it's coming from a genuine place and wanting to do everything I can, putting so much, you've seen so much time and energy into this. It's that's the most exhausting part for me, is it's all of this potential and all of these things that you can do. And it's just, you just need that last step that never comes. And it's like, it's really difficult because I wish it was different, because I speak with people all the time that say money's not an issue. We can find you money. And it's one of those things that the powers that be will determine eventually where that goes. And so until you have a proof of concept, it's really difficult to get it, which makes it's one of those scenarios of, I don't know if you had it when I graduated from college. It was, well, you don't have this experience, so you don't qualify for this role. It's like, well, if I don't have the experience, how am I going to get any of these roles? And it's like, well,
right.
And it's like, okay, so round and round we go in the carousel. And then what was the second one?
So this is you said your tagline is one simple act is enough to begin making the world a better place. And
Yes.
you obviously do many acts, simple and not. But for folks that are listening that are like, I'm super motivated, I want to address some aspect of this climate impact. What's an act they can do or a place they can get involved? Like, obviously you recommended the waterbear.com, but
Yeah. And that's, you know what, that's the miracle that it is of, it doesn't have to be a place. When I was backpacking years ago, originally I met an Italian gentleman who was walking from Milan on the Camino in Spain, and I randomly ran into this person, and we were talking, and he was just telling me stories about he met a gentleman in France that was homeless, and he's walking with all of this stuff, but he gave his tent to this homeless person because he didn't need it anymore. And it's like we were just discussing all of the things that we were shedding along this journey, that we never knew what the impact of those things were, those acts of kindness. But it's like there was something residual in it that we were able to share, that it's like, even though I don't know the impacts of the things that I did up until that point and the things that I still do, I'll never really know what my impact is on you or the people that I work with. But it's like,
yeah.
my goal is to always make it something where you feel inspired and you feel motivated and you feel something that it's like you want to pay that forward and pass it along. And it's that one act, whether I'm doing it on purpose or not, that's the way that I try and lead when I interact and engage with people. It's what makes you happy, what makes you motivated. Let's find that and let's do that. And it's not necessarily a thing, and it's almost all of them are non-money related, and that's where for me it's been the resonating. Greed is just it's a mental space. It's something where I've been my happiest when I've had nothing. And it's really something that, it doesn't take a specific thing to make someone's day. Like when I was out in Denver visiting Alicia, I was with Attila and we were talking to Jason. And every time I talk to that dude, I get the biggest smile on my face, like his energy. And it's like, it's you just aspire to be those types of people. And it's like, that's really where I think they're the strongest capability of just something as simple as smiling at a stranger, acknowledging someone's presence, like those saying please and thank you and common courtesies go a long way. Where is it going to change the world? No, but you don't know that person. They could change the world. You could have given them a positive outlook that changes the whole trajectory of how things go. And that's really where, like, it's always, you want to be the best person for everyone that you can be. And it's really hard. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. I love you're like so smiley. You're like, it's really hard. No,
it's really hard. I have to smile when I, think about things like that. Cause I'm just like, no, don't show your colors, be happy. You gotta, muster this up for everybody. But it's true. Like we all get tired. We all get, worn down, and it's something where making the most of every opportunity that you get is really what's going to empower people to be better. It's like engaging with you and engaging with the people that I do and the people that I'll watch this later. There's so much potential in everybody. And I firmly believe that. And it's whether it's for good or bad, I can't change the course of your life, but I can have an impact that could possibly do it. And so that's where it's by me being selfless for a little bit of time, I'm allowing you to be selfless, whether it's in that moment or later. That's the aspiration of the impact is, like Gandhi, being the change you wish to see in the world. It's something where you can't quantify your impacts, but it's something where if you never do it, you'll never be the example that you want other people to have. So it's more or less leading from the front for me.
No, I feel that. I think that there's an old saying that like a lot of people want to change the world and very few people want to change themselves. And and it's, to me, that's like, I actually did a series, a blogging series called Be the Change a couple of years ago, and made a suggestion every week for people to take on, to say, like, try this. What would this be like? How does this feel? Not, and to kind of like just experiment with your own engagement in the world, and what you put out there, and what you invite, and how you show up, because we have so many unconscious instincts, and so getting some sense of like what, maybe how to be a little more intentional, for me at least, was helpful in understanding, like you were talking about, some of my impact and the ways in which I might be influencing people counter to my own values, just because I'm having a reaction to, honestly, something that my parents did when I was 4, right? Like, I mean, who knows, brains, but
well, and it's, to be honest, like, I think it was an episode of Friends where Joey was proving that there's no such thing as a truly selfless act. And it's true. Like, I'm not going to lie. Every time that I realize that I've had a positive impact on someone's day, I get a kick of dopamine. Like, I feel really good about myself. I'm very happy that I was able to do that. And that's what continues that process. And it's selfish because I want that dopamine kick and I want to feel good about myself. But it's also something where the cost is well worth it at that point. That system energy exchange of, I'm going to do something because it, like Alicia's, what I do for others, I do for myself. It's the exact same thing.
I don't know if you saw, she said hi. She's earlier, because, yeah, she's grateful to you and your talents, Jeremy, for our listeners when this goes up on the audio only version.
I actually met her through YouTube as well. That's how I reached out to her. Watching her on TikTok.
So what's your strategy?
Shout out to YouTube.
That's great. Yeah. Well, and let's see. So I love that, cradle to cradle. One of the other things you talked about before we get on was the food sovereignty project that you're doing in South America. Can you give a little synopsis of that, and like any ways that people, if they're excited, could get involved, or if they want to get involved in anything that you're up to, like how do they just find you on LinkedIn or?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best. I think I've got, as a man of many hats, I also have many emails, so it's easier just to keep it all in one place. So LinkedIn's the best for me. For our food sovereignty project, it's I was actually connected with a friend of mine from Argentina back in Cincinnati, and he connected me with a gentleman who connected me with another woman, and we're actually working on developing an agricultural practice in Argentina. And it's something where there's still a lot of things that we have to work through. They just legalized industrial hemp and medical cannabis in Argentina within the past month. But really working on developing different strategies of ways to integrate hemp grain for feed for people, for animal feed, finding ways to create healthier systems for communities, because a lot of these countries are living in conditions that for us in the first world would be unacceptable by any standards. And so it's a place where there's a lot of, believe it or not, indigenous communities here in North America that suffer similar things. So it's from learning from those and understanding that there are tribes and communities even up where I'm currently in Maine that don't have regular access to clean drinking water and have bottled water. And it's a way of life. And it's from my travels. My mom always joked when I came back that I would drink from the faucet or drink from the hose. And I'm like, Mom, this is such a luxury. Like, you don't understand that there are people in the world that they don't have potable water. I had to go to the store every morning to get water for the day. And it's like, there's stages like that there are communities and countries. In Argentina, Buenos Aires is an amazing city. But once you get into the countrysides, they're dealing with gray water issues. They're dealing with high salinity soils. And there's only some things they can grow, and they're not necessarily getting the nutritional value that they need. And that's where our project is to come in, work with the indigenous knowledge that I've learned from working with the communities, working with regenerative agriculture, which is, again, an indigenous practice that they've been doing for thousands of years. Zero waste practice, which the indigenous have been doing forever. and taking those and saying, okay, how can we impact this community? And just start small. We don't need to change everyone, but we can make that an example and expand that out and let it form organically. And it's something where these farmers are dealing with either no fertilizer, or at this point, they can't afford it anymore. And so it's now we're stuck in a world where the farmers that were reliant on the fertilizers and pesticides no longer have access. So what, they don't get food? It can't, that's not possible. So at least in my mind, most of those communities will have to abandon their land. And really that's the most tragic thing for me. So with these projects, we're experimenting with different groups from around the world, working on things from altitude to soil compaction to, again, back to this high salinity soils, and then looking into things like remediation properties of getting things like heavy metals and toxic chemicals out of the soil so that the farmers can start to grow the food again for the people. So it's a massive undertaking, and it's one where I by no means can do it by myself. Luckily, the ABRI group, which unfortunately our website's down at the moment. I'm working one of my other ones on getting that back live. So,
and I'll put everything in the notes. So when you have it up, just let me know, and it'll all go in there so people can find it.
Well, it's between those projects, there are solutions, and these things can feed into other networks. The things that we're learning in South America can transfer to the island communities, where here's ways of generating fertilizer from salt water. Here's ways of like from your waste, we can do this. So you no longer need these artificial or synthetic like chemicals that are killing the reefs and your food systems and the waterways. And it's like everything kind of has this ripple effect where you fix one problem and it like gradually impacts another, which impacts another. And so if we can create, really good peer reviewable research with these universities and governments, there's real potential for change. And that's the most exciting thing is there's so much potential that we just need to get it to start working. And hopefully we can get that project started within the next year. And the remediation ones we're hoping to start within the next couple months. So getting the soil clean is another big piece of the issues that we're going to suffer here specifically in the U.S.
So I asked if people had a question, and your guy, Jason, does. So is a partnership with Tyson Foods a potential goal for you to further help the collective? If so, what would you see as a collaborative partnership?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've actually spoken about his colleague or his friend at Tyson. It's one where there's they say you move quickly alone, you move farther together. And that's one where we're at a piece where I've moved quickly alone. And now it's a matter of how do we impact industries? I've set the ego aside of whether it's Tyson, I don't really care if it's Monsanto's. If they're willing to genuinely put in work to improve their systems that help communities, I want them to have a partnership and some kind of collaboration with us, because it's through those relationships that it takes that money incentive away, because now you have that, as Simon Sinek, he's got the finite and infinite game. And the infinite game is humanity's survival. If we continue to do these practices, we're just digging with two shovels. But if we can get the Coca-Colas, the Monsantos, the Nestle's, these major contributors to pollutions and contaminants that impact these communities, that's really where we need to be. If you listen to a lot of them, there's a lot of greenwashing involved in that. And it's not, I mean, part of it is manipulation, but a way to identify that is how are they quantifying their change? And that's really where they're falling short. For as brilliant as these industries are, they really don't have a clue for the most part. And that's really where people like myself and others that have worked on this and are actually involved in the communities can say, here is your impact, and reconnect them back to the people and to the issues that they're facing. Because there's going to come a time where fertilizers are going to be too expensive for people to buy. And it's similar to the carbon credits of people, as much as I'm not an advocate for carbon credits, there will come a point where a Procter and Gamble is not going to want to pay $8,000 of credit for a carbon credit to be carbon neutral. And that's really where that break point is going to happen. And so it's really educating them and partnering with them and saying, don't get to this point. By then it is too late. We still have time. It's just a matter of putting resources in the right place, prioritizing timelines, and saying, instead of changing the world in a day, let's change a community, and then we'll change another one. And then we'll just let this ripple effect kind of pass along, where it's with the beauty of the internet. Once it's impacted somewhere, if we define the parameters and we say, this is the data and these are the variables and these are how they changed, I can go to every community that suffers from those variables and say, here's your solution.
Yeah.
And we can move slowly but surely. But once we find one, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of communities that have the exact same problem that we can begin to work towards. So by solving one, we solve many. And then it's just a matter of, okay, Tyson does chicken. We've got, I don't know, we can do beef. We can do, I'm trying to get away from all of the meat analogies, but it's a real problem. And those are things where there's research that shows that hemp grain reduces methane and actually helps support, the stomach and digestive process for cows. Why aren't we using
That's great. Yeah, no, I mean, there are so many solutions, right? And yet it's and whenever you peel it back, there's always more. I mean, that's my experience, but any final thoughts or suggestions, things you're excited about? Obviously, besides being on the show, thanks for being here.
Yeah, really excited to be here. It's always fun hanging out with you. I'm sorry, I'll make sure I have some more hats by the time.
No, it's okay. I promised you my squid hat. I should get that.
Yeah, unfortunately, most of mine are outside. But I will say, I guess for me, a big ending note would be more along the lines of feel free to reach out to me, or feel free to just search for things that are interesting to you. If you see something in the news, take it for a grain of salt, and really look into the details of what it's about, because there are a lot of things in the media that are about inciting fear that aren't necessarily entirely true. They're partially true, but understanding really what those are and learning from it and saying, okay, is this something that I'm passionate about, or dismiss it? If you dismiss it, it's okay. It's all right not to vote on everything, but finding those things that you're really passionate about and pursuing those. There's so many problems in the world, and it's paralyzing for a lot of people. So I would say, don't be paralyzed. Just focus on the things that you can do. And those things are the things you're passionate about. And from those, we'll create a network, and the Catalyst 2030 group is doing an amazing job of that. But there are networks out there, and there are people out there that are working on things that you're not alone. There are plenty of people that, even, Jason and I have a bit of a disconnect on, I'm doing hemp and he's not for some things. We still love to we still go back and forth and talk to each other, and there's growth and development, and there's a lot of things that we learn from each other just from being from different parts of the world. And it's those are things where it's never shy away from the opportunities, because you never know who you're talking to until you learn about them. And from those experiences, if you're really listening, there's real potential to actually do something incredible. And that's really where the exciting stuff happens. So keep an open mind, and, keep feeding the evil empire of YouTube. And can watch something. If there's something else, I'll be sure to post it on LinkedIn.
I follow you on LinkedIn, so I feel like I've got a direct line into your brain around this, which is fantastic.
All you gotta do is ask. I'm happy. Yeah. I'm happy to say I don't know, and it's those are the other opportunities where I love people asking me things that I don't know, because you never know until you're asked. And so it's that's a really good point. I want to learn about that, and love those moments. But
thank you. I appreciate you making time for me and for everybody. And thanks everyone for joining us in the chat and asking questions. And I'm not doing a show on July 3rd or 4th, whenever it is, because holiday. So my next one is July 18th. and it'll be with Mikey Famine talking about live streaming. It's the new industry.
And Mikey's the best.
It's the first time I've had him on any of my shows, so I'm pretty excited about it. It's going to be awesome. Hey, thank you everybody for being here, and we'll see you all in a few weeks. And have a good holiday, whichever holidays are coming up for you.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for listening.
Bye, guys.